Today we are going to be doing a value scale, and we're going to be using a couple different shading techniques in order to do that. So you'll need this shading worksheet. Draw this out in your sketchbook or on a blank piece of paper if you're not able to print something off. So we will add our name to the top of it, and whatever class period you're in will be the hour. And we're going to put some definitions next to each one of these as we go through. So for hatching, they're just lines that are going the same direction. And the other thing that's important besides the same direction is the spacing. So I'm just going to leave a little quote over here saying that spacing is important. So what we're going to do is we're all going to go in one direction. However, we have some different pencils in our packet. So we've got an H, a 2H, and an HB. Oh, sorry, a 2B. So what we're going to do is we're going to start with a value line or scale to help you understand what these mean. So our middle of our scale is an HB. I like to think of that as 0. And then as we go up the scale, it's going to get darker. As we go down the scale, it's going to get lighter. So our 2B is actually right here. And 2B, the B stands for brittle, or also known as soft. So the softer the lead, the more the lead wants to come out and get on the paper, and that's darker. Our 2H is harder. So the harder lead doesn't want to come out on the paper as easily as the brittle lead. And so it'll make it lighter. So as we go up the scale, I like to think of that as positive. And as we go down the scale, I like to think of that as negative. Hence again, getting darker, getting lighter. There are a bunch more pencils than just this. There also is just a B, just an H. Think of that as like 1B or 1H, kind of like in math class. And then this goes all the way up, I want to say, to a 9B, as well as going all the way down to a 9H. The H kind of gets scratchy on the paper, whereas the B's, again, because they're brittle and softer, they just kind of flow out on the paper a little bit better. And you'll notice that as we work with them today. So we'll put our other pencils off to the side. We're going to start with our 2H, and we're going to start in these two squares. So just to remind myself that that's what I'm using, I'm just going to label that 2H. So we're just going to do little lines. You can kind of see an example there. But the thing to take note of is that they're going in the same direction, and it's their spacing that really determines the illusion of it being darker. So if this is fairly white, as we get over here, we want it to kind of be that dark. I'm going to change directions just for fun. And I'm slowly going to start to make my lines tighter than they were on the last one. We're going to be done with our 2H for a second, and now we're going to go to the HB for this middle section here. And we really shouldn't have to press too much harder, but you can already tell that that's darker than the last one. Now I'll bring my lines closer together for this one. This is kind of our middle value. And you can always come back and darken a few lines if you need to. And I'll switch it up again. The lines are going to get pretty tight now. Not quite just coloring in the paper, but almost. And if you kind of blur your eyes a little bit, you can see the gradation going across. Right here I kind of messed up and made it a little bit too dark. That happens. It's okay. You can kind of see the whole concept, and that's more what we're looking for. So the 2B is our last one. We'll label this last area here. And now our lines are going to be about as tight as they were in this last one, because our graphite is already darker from our pencil. And it's nice to use pencils that are darker or lighter because then you don't actually have to press hard. Your pencil is doing the work. You do want to be conscious of how hard you're pressing. You don't want to press so hard that you indent your paper, but you still want the graphite to come out. And you can see that that last one's a lot darker. This next one, cross hatching, really similar to hatching, but we're just going to crisscross our lines. So we'll give this one a definition too. Cross hatching is just overlapping lines. And again, the spacing is important. The tighter you make them, then there's that illusion of the areas being darker or lighter, depending on how tight they are. So let's do that again, but we're going to add another overlapping section. So we're going to start with our 2H in the first two sections, and we'll space them out. If you notice any mistakes with spacing that you did in the first one, this is a great chance to kind of correct it. And you're just going to go back over it. So this next one's going to be a little bit tighter than that first one. And now we're going to change pencils. So we're going to go back to our HB for the middle section. We should be able to space our lines about the same as the last one, just because the graphite of the pencil is darker. Then the middle one, I'll slightly press harder, not too much, and I'll bring my lines together. That's the more important thing, is really bringing those lines together. And then a little bit tighter over here. And you can kind of use your top one as an example for one direction as you think about your spacing. And if you go outside the edges a little bit, that's okay. I know I'm going quick. It's the concept of seeing the light to dark that's the important thing, not necessarily staying within the lines. The last two, we will use our 2B. Again, we can kind of keep the same spacing as that last one. We can also see above the value of the gray that we're trying to get to. We're not quite coloring it in, so we're not going to get that exact one. And for the last one, just like above, really tight together, pressing maybe slightly harder than the first time, but again, we don't want to engrave our paper. If that happens, where you catch a bump from something below you, maybe a pencil shaving or nick in the table, don't worry about that so much, it happens. We will use boards with our other projects so that hopefully things like that don't take place. Cool, so that's cross hatching. So very similar to hatching, but just overlapping lines instead, and still paying attention to which pencils we're using. This next one's gonna get a little bit loud. We're gonna start with our 2H again. We're going to do stippling. So it's basically just dots. But the tighter your dots are together, just like spacing was important with hatching and cross hatching, is also super important with stippling. So I'm just going to do little sections for this one. To do the whole box takes a lot of work. So spacing out some dots and then making those dots tighter together. Again, we're using a 2H. And after we do the first two with our 2H, we're going to upgrade to an HB. And again, we're just doing little sections. We can keep the same amount of tightness, or spacing I should say, as the first one, but we don't have to press too much harder because this pencil, the graphite's coming out pretty easily. The next one, we're going to bring our dots together a little bit more. Maybe press a hair harder. And we're going to bring our dots even tighter together. And this is why we're just doing a small space. To fill the whole space would take quite a bit of time. And now we're going to upgrade to the next one, which is a 2B. Again, about the same spacing, as the last one. And the final one's going to be super close together. Stippling can look really nice and neat, especially if you're using a pen and it's not bleeding on you. It can be a really wonderful detail to add to pieces, but we're just trying to get the concept of going from light, so more open dots with the 2H, working our way up to tighter dots with our 2B, and getting a lot closer together. We did another one in class today where we filled most of the square, and you can see that gradation. But as you get to the end, feel free just to do little sections of it instead of filling the space. That does take a little bit of extra time. The last one, there's a couple tricks with blending. So we're gonna start out just like we did above, how we did the 2H. We are going to do the 2H about to here. So let's label that first. And then our HB, we're actually going to overlap with our 2H. So we're going to overlap just a little bit, bring it out quite a ways. That's your HB. And then our 2B will be right here. We're not going to go all the way. We don't need all that space. You can kind of see the gradation above from light to dark. And you can start to see where those values overlap with your lighter gray, starting to overlap with your medium value. That's what's going to happen down here. And then, of course, going as dark as you can with a 2B. There are others, as we talked about, so a 3B, a 4B, a 6B would definitely be darker than our 2B. So each time you work with different pencils, sometimes it's nice to at least do one value scale just to see what your pencils are capable of doing. So we will start with our 2H. And then what I want you guys to do is just do the same amount of pressure the whole time. Don't change. Try to keep it the same as best you can. If you go outside the lines, no stress. And then once you get to the end of the 2H line, which is right there, then we're going to stop. Put that pencil down. Now we're going to take our HB and we're going to overlap it slightly with our 2H. Trying to press the same amount of pressure until we get to here. Just a little bit more pressure, not a ton. It's going to be subtle. Looks like I need to fill that back in a little bit. My pressure wasn't the same. So you can always overlap it and build up your tonal value if you notice that you started to press lighter. And sometimes you really can't tell that you pressed lighter. We're going to stop right here. So try to look at it. If it's nice and consistent, it's what you want. And I want that to fade out there. Last one is going to be our 2B. We are going to slightly overlap it there, pressing lightly. Ooh, this isn't my 2B. I could feel that it was the 2H. It felt hard. Here's our 2B. All right, so pressing lightly. There we go. That's so much smoother. And then slowly add a little bit more pressure to it, but we don't want to engrave our paper. And if you need to go back and smooth it out, you can. This shows you it's not a smooth transition right now of a gradation. It's a little subtle. We have one value here, sort of another value here, a little bit darker here, a little bit darker here, and definitely a lot darker there since we were overlapping those two values. What I want you guys to see is the difference when you go in and you blend that with your tortillon. There it is. So in your pencil packet today, you had a couple other things besides your two pencils. You had an eraser, just in case you needed it, a sharpener, which by the way, if you sharpen with these, since they don't catch them, I always like to keep a paper towel around. That way, when I go to sharpen something, my shavings stay in the paper towel, and I can just keep that off to the side with my sharpener. This will let you sharpen your tortillon, so if it's dirty or if it needs more of a point to it, you can just go in one direction and that'll clean it off. So it's just a piece of sandpaper, I think, on a stick. What you're going to do is taking your Tortillon on the bottom part of this, I want you guys to just start blending it. Start with the light area and then move over to the darker areas. I want you to see the difference between smudging your lines and then just shading your lines. Some people like that smudged look, some people don't. Things to think about when you're smudging your lines: if you go back and forth, you're going to be taking the light graphite from here over to the darker graphite, which is fine. But once you get over here and you pull that darker graphite back, it's going to change your value. So that's why we started blending this together first, and then we went over here. Another thing is, a lot of people, once they blend, they think they're done. Well, I don't like that line there, so I'm going to try to go in with my HB and add a little bit more graphite. When you're blending, you're just working with what's on your paper. So by adding a little bit more graphite, I can smooth that area out, as well as this area over here. And the Tortillon is picking up some of the graphite too, so maybe it took too much away. And I'll go in with my 2B, make this a little bit darker. Again, I don't want to press so hard that I indent my paper. There we go. That's a much smoother transition. There's still a little bit of a line there, but it's better than it was. So you can pick whichever shading style you like, if you like blending with the Tortillon, or if you just like blending by overlapping your different tones. There's different ways to blend. So that's our value scale. That is going to take us into our next project. So thanks for watching.